For 3 weeks, he watched her leave with bags she never brought in. He was certain she was stealing from him. So one night, he followed her, ready to call the police, ready to end it. What he discovered in a church basement would destroy everything he thought he knew. Harrison Webb was 38 years old and controlled half of Manhattan's skyline. He noticed everything, every market shift, every contract detail, every suspicious pattern, except the woman who raised him. Her name was Dorothy. She'd been with his family since he was 3, since the car accident that killed his mother and shattered his father. When Harrison stood frozen at the funeral, Dorothy knelt beside him and let him cry. When his father became a ghost in his own home, Dorothy kept the boy fed, loved, alive. She taught him to read. She sat with him through nightmares. She loved him when no one else had the strength to try. But Harrison never asked about her life, never wondered if she was lonely, never thought to learn if she had a family of her own. She was simply there, steady, quiet, essential, invisible, until 3 weeks ago when he noticed her leaving his building after her shift, weighed down by shopping bags bulging with groceries she clearly hadn't brought in that morning. His mind went to the darkest place. Theft, betrayal, after everything he'd given her. On a cold November evening, Harrison decided to follow her through Brooklyn and catch her red-handed. What he discovered would shatter the empire he'd built on blindness. Before we continue this story, tell me where you are watching from and kindly subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories. Harrison kept 2 cars back as Dorothy descended into the DeKalb Avenue station. He'd never taken the subway in years, couldn't remember the last time, but he swiped his card and followed her onto the Q train, standing at the opposite end of the car, face hidden behind his phone. She got off at Fulton Street. Harrison's chest tightened. This was his neighborhood. Or it had been, before web development transformed it. The buildings looked different now, restored brownstones with gleaming windows, artisanal coffee shops where bodegas used to be, white faces where there used to be. He'd never actually paid attention to who used to be here. Dorothy moved slowly, the bags weighing her down. She passed the luxury condos his company had just finished, didn't even glance up. 3 blocks down, she turned into an alley behind a church Harrison had never noticed. Paint peeling, windows dark. The kind of building his acquisition team would flag as redevelopment potential. She slipped around back to a basement entrance. Harrison waited in the shadows, counted to 30, then followed. The smell hit him first. Vegetable soup, cornbread, something warm and alive. The basement was packed, 60 people, maybe more, sitting at folding tables with mismatched chairs, worn coats, tired eyes, a little girl with braids clutching a stuffed bear, an elderly man with a cane, a younger man with a military jacket and a pronounced limp, and Dorothy, silver hair tied back, standing at an industrial stove, ladling soup into bowls, calling people by name with a smile Harrison had never seen on her face. Not in 35 years. "Miss Dorothy, you got that cornbread?" the veteran asked. "Made it fresh, Jerome. Here's extra for later." She wrapped 2 pieces in foil, pressed them into his hands. The bags, the groceries, not stolen, given. Harrison couldn't breathe. A woman looked up, her face darkening with recognition. "That's him," she said, voice rising. "That's Webb, the one who bought our building." Heads turned, conversations stopped. Dorothy looked up, saw Harrison standing in the doorway. No surprise in her eyes, just exhaustion. "Everyone," she said quietly, "this is Mr. Webb. He's just leaving." But Harrison couldn't move. Jerome stood, limped toward him. "You evicted my family 2 years ago, raised the rent from $1,200 to $3,800 in 1 month. My daughter had to change schools." The elderly man with the cane spoke, his voice soft but cutting. "You bought my building in 2019. I'd lived there 42 years. The buyout you gave me lasted 7 months." He gestured to the basement around them. "Now I sleep here when they'll let me." Harrison stumbled backward, up the stairs, into the November cold. His hands were shaking, his vision blurred. "How long?" Dorothy's voice came from behind him. She'd followed him out, stood by his car, empty-handed now. The bags had been full of food for people he'd destroyed. "How long have you been doing this?" Harrison managed. 18 years, since Marcus died." "Who's—" His throat closed. "Who's Marcus?" Dorothy's face hardened. "My son, the one you never asked about." She walked away. Harrison stood there, frozen, until his eyes caught a flyer taped to the church door. "In memory of Marcus Mitchell, 1988-2019. Below the dates, in smaller print, he saw his company's name listed as landlord of the building where Marcus Mitchell froze to death 3 weeks after eviction. The woman who raised him had a son, had loved someone, had lost everything, and Harrison had never asked a single question. Harrison didn't go home. He sat in his car outside that church for 2 hours, staring at the flyer through the windshield. Marcus Mitchell, 1988 to 2019, 31 years old, Dorothy's son. When he finally drove back to his penthouse, the sun was breaking over the East River. The doorman greeted him like always. The elevator rose silently to the 72nd floor. Everything exactly as he'd left it. Marble counters, floor-to-ceiling windows, the skyline spreading out like a kingdom he'd conquered. His skyline. Towers bearing his name. Webb Plaza. Webb Heights, the Webb at Williamsburg. But all he could see was Dorothy's face. My son. The one you never asked about. He couldn't sleep, couldn't sit still. Memories came flooding back, sharp and cutting, each one a small violence he'd never recognized. Age 5, standing at his mother's funeral in a suit that didn't fit, frozen, unable to cry. His father couldn't even look at him. The grief had swallowed the man whole. But Dorothy knelt beside Harrison, let him cry into her shoulder, and whispered, "I've got you, baby. I've got you." Age 9, sitting at the kitchen table past midnight, struggling with fractions, the house too big and too quiet. His father was traveling again. Always traveling. Dorothy sat with him, even though she'd worked a 12-hour day, made him hot chocolate, told him he was smart enough to figure it out. Stayed until he did. Age 16, the night before he left for college. Dorothy packed his bags, ironed his shirts. When he came downstairs, she pressed $200 into his hand. "For emergencies. Don't tell your father." He'd never asked where she got that money. Never thanked her properly. Never wondered if she needed it more than he did. The next morning, Dorothy arrived at 7 o'clock as always. Same quiet knock. Same soft footsteps in the hallway. "Good morning, Mr. Webb," she said, formal, distant. Harrison had been up all night. He'd called his head of HR at 3 a.m., upgraded her insurance to executive level, full coverage, no copays, no deductibles. Scheduled her a doctor's appointment for tomorrow with the best internist in Manhattan. "Dorothy, His voice came out rough. "I upgraded your insurance. Full coverage. And I made you a doctor's appointment. Tomorrow at 10. Her hands stilled on the coffee pot. "Why now?" "What? After 35 years, why do you suddenly care about my health?" Harrison stammered. "I didn't know you were—" "You didn't ask." Her voice shook. She turned to face him, and her eyes were filled with something he'd never seen there before. Anger, raw and righteous. "I worked for you every single day for 35 years, Harrison. I raised you. I loved you like my own child. And you never once asked if I was okay, if I was lonely, if I needed help." Tears gathered in her eyes. "You never even asked if I had children. And now you find out I did, that I lost him, and you think you can fix it with better insurance?" She set down the coffee pot, her hands trembling. "You can't fix 35 years with an appointment, Mr. Webb." She walked out. Not to another room. Out. The front door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like thunder. Harrison stood alone in his spotless kitchen, surrounded by Italian marble and sub-zero appliances, and a view worth $10 million. and felt like the poorest man alive. Harrison couldn't focus. His assistant knocked twice. Investors on the line. Contracts waiting for signature. He waved her away. By 11, she'd canceled 3 meetings. By noon, Harrison was in his car, driving back to Fulton Street. The church looked even more forgotten in daylight. Graffiti on the brick, boarded windows. A building his acquisition team would have demolished without a second thought. He parked across the street and sat there for 10 minutes before finally getting out. The basement door was unlocked. Inside, the space looked smaller, sadder. Just folding tables stacked against the wall, and that industrial stove in the corner. The smell of soup still lingered. Jerome was there, stacking chairs. He looked up when Harrison entered, his face guarded, defensive. "What do you want?" "I'm trying to understand," Harrison said. "Understand what?" Jerome's voice was hard. "How to feel better about destroying people's lives?" Harrison flinched, but didn't leave. "Tell me about Dorothy." Jerome studied him for a long moment, then sat down heavily on one of the folding chairs. "I came back from Afghanistan in 2016. 2 tours. Saw things that don't leave you." His jaw clenched. Couldn't hold a job. Couldn't sleep without seeing things. Ended up on the streets. He looked at Harrison directly. "Your company bought the SRO where I was staying. Evicted everyone. Turned it into luxury condos. I slept outside for 8 months." Harrison felt sick. "Miss Dorothy found me behind this church one night, January 2017. I was hypothermic, hallucinating, seeing things that weren't there." Jerome's voice cracked slightly. "She brought me soup, a blanket, sat with me for 3 hours in the freezing cold. Didn't preach, didn't judge, didn't try to fix me. Just stayed." He wiped his face roughly. "She got me into a VA program, helped me find housing, checked on me every single week for 2 years. Still does." He looked up. "You know she's sick, right? Diabetes. Her kidneys are failing. She can barely afford her rent, but she's out here feeding us." Harrison's chest tightened. "She never told me." Jerome's laugh was bitter. "Why would she? She works for you every day, and you don't even know her last name." "Mitchell," Harrison whispered. Jerome's eyes widened. "Since when?" "Since last night." Jerome shook his head slowly. "You know what the really messed up thing is? She never badmouths you, never complains. People at the kitchen ask her all the time, 'Why do you work for the man who's destroying our neighborhood?' You know what she says?" Harrison could barely breathe. "He doesn't know better yet, but he will." Jerome stood. "After everything you've done, after your company evicted her son, after you've spent 35 years treating her like furniture, she still believes in you." He moved toward the door, stopped. "If you're here because you feel guilty, leave. We don't need your guilt. Guilt doesn't feed anybody. Guilt doesn't bring people home." His voice hardened. "But if you're here because you actually want to change, then prove it. Show up, listen, learn their names." He walked out, letting the door slam behind him. Harrison sat alone in the empty basement. The smell of soup hung in the air, evidence of Dorothy's quiet generosity, her radical grace. He thought about Jerome, hypothermic behind a church that Harrison's company probably wanted to demolish. He thought about Marcus, freezing to death in a building Harrison owned. He'd been given a gift he didn't deserve. Another chance. The question was whether he had the courage to take it. Thursday evening, 6:45 p.m. Harrison stood outside the church in jeans and a sweater, the most casual clothes he owned, pulled from the back of his closet where they'd hung untouched for years. People were already lining up outside, breath visible in the November cold, worn jackets, tired faces, children holding their mother's hands. Harrison pushed open the door. Dorothy was inside, stirring a massive pot of chili, her back to him. She turned when she heard footsteps, and surprise flickered across her face. "What are you doing here?" "I want to help," Harrison said. Dorothy studied him for a long moment. Something unreadable passed through her eyes. Finally, she nodded toward the cabinet. Bowls are in there. People start coming in at 7. Harrison's hands shook as he set out bowls. By 7:15, the basement was full. 60 people, maybe more, finding seats at the folding tables. Dorothy moved between them with practiced ease, but Harrison felt frozen, awkward, completely out of place. An elderly woman came through the line first. Harrison ladled chili into her bowl, fumbling with the ladle. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said, smiling. "You're welcome," he managed. A man with an oxygen tank shuffled forward. "God bless you." "You too." One bowl, then another, then another. Slowly, Harrison found a rhythm. A young mother with 3 kids. She thanked him 5 times. A little girl named Amara, with bright eyes and a worn stuffed bear. Walter, the elderly man with the cane, who looked at Harrison with something between suspicion and sadness. Halfway through the evening, Harrison noticed Dorothy swaying by the stove. She gripped the counter, face pale, lips pressed tight. "Dorothy!" Harrison set down the ladle, moved toward her. "I'm fine," she said, but she wasn't. Her hands were trembling. "When did you last eat?" She didn't answer. Harrison guided her to a chair, filled a bowl with chili, added cornbread. Set it in front of her. "Eat. There are still people. I'll handle it." Dorothy looked up at him, and something shifted in her expression. She picked up the spoon. Harrison returned to the line. Jerome watched from across the room, arms crossed, then gave a slight nod of approval. By 9 o'clock, the last person had left. Harrison helped clean, washing bowls in the industrial sink, wiping down tables, sweeping the floor. Dorothy moved slowly, exhaustion in every step. "Let me drive you home," Harrison said. "You don't have to." "I know, I want to." They drove in silence through Brooklyn's dark streets. Finally, Dorothy spoke. "Why did you come tonight?" "Because Jerome told me if I wanted to understand, I had to show up." "And do you understand?" Harrison thought about the faces he'd served. Walter with his cane. Amara with her bright smile. The mother who'd thanked him 5 times, like kindness was something rare and precious. "I'm starting to," he said quietly. They pulled up to Dorothy's building. A rundown walk-up in Bed-Stuy, paint peeling, trash on the stoop. She reached for the door handle, then stopped. "I haven't seen a doctor in over 4 years," she said. "Can't afford it. The insurance you provide covers almost nothing." Harrison sat in stunned silence. "Good night, Mr. Webb." She got out, walked slowly to her door, favoring her left leg. Harrison watched her climb the stairs, each step an effort, and something broke open inside him. He pulled out his phone, called his head of HR. She answered groggily. It was past 10. "Dorothy Mitchell's insurance. Upgrade it to executive level, tonight. Full coverage, no limits." "I don't care what it costs. Harrison, it's—" "Tonight," he repeated and hung up. Harrison couldn't sleep. He sat at his desk, the city lights glittering below, and opened his laptop. Pulled up the development records. The Williamsburg waterfront project, 800 families being displaced. His biggest deal yet. $40 million profit margin. He started reading. Not the summaries his team prepared, the actual files. Every single one. James Patterson, 64. Janitor. Lived in apartment 3C for 28 years. Buyout, $18,000. Current status, moved to New Jersey, lost his job, rarely sees his grandkids anymore. Keisha Williams, 37. Single mother, 2 kids, nurse. Displacement forced her to pull her children from their school, moved to the Bronx. Now commutes 3 hours daily to work. Harrison's hands started shaking. He kept reading. An 80-year-old woman named Rose Chen. Evicted after 34 years. Died 4 months later. Her son's complaint letter was attached to the file. My mother never recovered from losing her home. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping. The stress killed her, and your company is responsible. Harrison read it 3 times. Then he put his head in his hands and sobbed. The sun was rising over the East River when his phone rang. 7 Chio Xiao AM. Unknown number. Mr. Webb? This is Dr. Patel from Brooklyn Hospital. You're listed as the emergency contact for Dorothy Mitchell. His stomach dropped. Is she okay? She collapsed last night. We've admitted her. You should come. Harrison was out the door in minutes, still wearing yesterday's clothes. He found her in a room on the 4th floor. IV in her arm, monitors beeping steadily beside the bed. She looked small, fragile, nothing like the woman who'd held him through nightmares when he was 5 years old. Dr. Patel met him outside the room. Young, kind eyes, tired from a night shift. Mr. Webb, Dorothy has advanced diabetes, stage 3 kidney disease, blood pressure 180 over 110, severe anemia. Each word was a knife. All treatable, but she hasn't seen a doctor in years. These conditions have been progressing unchecked. Why? Harrison asked, though he already knew. Her previous insurance required $400 to $500 monthly in out-of-pocket costs for the care she needed. She couldn't afford it. Harrison sank into the chair beside Dorothy's bed. When she woke, her eyes found him immediately. You don't have to be here, she said, voice hoarse. Yes, I do. His voice broke. Your middle name is Louise. Dorothy Louise Mitchell, born 1969 in Birmingham, Alabama. Her eyes widened. You enlisted at 19, served in Desert Storm as a combat medic, earned the Silver Star for saving 23 soldiers under fire. Harrison's research had taken him 2 hours, sitting at his desk while she lay here alone. You had a son named Marcus, born 1988. He struggled with addiction. You tried everything to save him. Tears streamed down Dorothy's face. And in 2019, my company evicted him from his apartment. He died 3 weeks later from exposure. Harrison's voice cracked completely. I gave you the minimum insurance because I never thought about what that actually meant. I paid you fairly, or what I thought was fair, but I never asked if you could afford your rent, your medicine, your life. He leaned forward. You've spent 35 years giving me everything, your time, your love, your life, and I never gave you anything that mattered. Dorothy reached for his hand. Her fingers were thin, trembling. You didn't know. I didn't ask, Harrison said, and that's worse. I could have asked any day for 35 years. I chose not to. I chose to keep you invisible because it was easier than seeing you. Her grip tightened. So what are you going to do now? Harrison looked at her, really looked at her, and realized he had no idea. But he had to start somewhere. Everything different, he whispered. Dorothy squeezed his hand. I forgave you a long time ago, Harrison. He looked up, confused. Why? Because holding on to anger would have destroyed me, and I had too many people depending on me to let that happen. She paused, her breathing still labored. But forgiveness doesn't mean everything's okay. It means you have a chance to do better. Harrison nodded, tears streaming down his face. Dorothy continued, her voice growing stronger. You want to help me? Really help? Then stop trying to save me. I don't need saving. What do you need? A partner, she said clearly. Someone who sees what I see. Who cares about what I care about. She gestured beyond the hospital room, toward the city outside. The people at the kitchen, the families you're about to displace. Jerome, Walter, all of them. Her voice grew firm despite her exhaustion. I've watched you build an empire, Harrison. It's impressive. It really is. But empires built on other people's loss don't last. They crumble. And when they do, all you're left with is money and an empty penthouse. The words landed like stones in his chest. So if you want to change, Dorothy said, then change what you're building. Not just for me, for everyone. Build something that doesn't require people to lose their homes for you to make your fortune. Harrison sat back. How? Start by listening to them. Really listening. Not to manage them or pacify them, but to learn what they actually need. She looked at him directly. Can you do that? Yes. Can you do it even when it costs you? Even when your board fights you? Even when you make less money? Harrison didn't hesitate. Yes. Dorothy studied his face, searching for truth, for commitment, for something deeper than guilt. Finally, she nodded. Okay. Then let's get to work. Harrison pulled out his phone, called his attorney. She answered on the second ring. The Williamsburg Waterfront Project. I want every family we're displacing contacted personally. I want their names, their stories, what they need. Harrison, this will take months. Then we take months. He hung up. Dorothy watched him, something like hope flickering in her tired eyes. I'm calling an emergency board meeting, Harrison said. I'm restructuring everything, the whole company, how we develop, how we build, who we build for. They'll fight you. I know. You might lose the company, your grandfather's legacy, everything you've worked for. Then I'll build something better. Harrison leaned forward. Something that doesn't destroy people, something that actually serves them. Dorothy smiled, genuine and warm, the first real smile she'd given him in days. Now you're starting to get it. I want you part of this, Harrison said. Not just as someone I employ, as a partner, director of community partnerships. Full salary, equal to any executive, full decision-making authority, a seat on the board. Harrison, you've been doing this work for 18 years while I built towers, he said. You see people I've spent my life ignoring. You understand what communities need. You've earned trust I've only destroyed. Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. I'm asking you, Harrison said quietly, to help me learn how to build something that matters. Not monuments with my name on them. Homes where people can actually live. She squeezed his hand again, tighter this time. Okay, she whispered, but this won't be easy. Real change never is. I know. People won't trust you right away. You'll have to prove yourself over and over again. I know. And you'll have to be willing to give up control. To listen even when you think you know better. Harrison nodded. I'm ready. Dorothy closed her eyes, exhausted but peaceful. Then we start as soon as I get out of this hospital bed. Thursday night, Harrison returned to the church alone. Dorothy was still in the hospital, recovering, getting stronger. He'd visited her that afternoon, promised he'd go to the kitchen in her place. The basement felt different without her. Quieter, less warm. Harrison served soup, handed out bread, tried to remember names the way Dorothy did. Amara, Mrs. Jenkins, a young mother named Carmen with 3 kids. Walter Freeman sat in the corner, the elderly man with the cane. Harrison had seen him last week, but now he knew the file, knew the numbers, knew what they meant. 42 years in the same apartment, $15,000 buyout, now living in a shelter. Harrison's hands went cold. He set down the ladle, walked over. Mr. Freeman, may I sit? Walter looked up, studied him with tired eyes. Free country. Harrison sat. The words stuck in his throat. I'm Harrison Webb. Walter's expression didn't change. He took a slow sip of soup, set the spoon down carefully. I know who you are, son. You bought my building in 2019, said you were going to renovate it, make it better. His voice was measured, not angry. Somehow that was worse than anger. And you did, Walter continued. New windows, new lobby, real nice. He took another sip. Then you raised my rent from $950 to $2,800, gave me 60 days to move or sign a new lease I couldn't afford on my pension. Harrison couldn't breathe. I lived there 42 years, Walter said. Raised my son in that apartment. Buried my wife from that apartment. Every morning, I'd sit by the window and watch the sun come up over Prospect Park. 42 years. He set down his spoon. The buyout you gave me, $15,000 for 42 years of my life, ran out in 7 months. Now I sleep in a city shelter when they have room. Or here, when they'll let me stay. Harrison felt tears burning behind his eyes. Mr. Freeman, I'm so sorry. You sorry? Walter asked. Or you just feel bad now that you got a face to go with the file? The question cut clean through. Both, Harrison admitted. Walter leaned back. You know what the worst part is? It wasn't even personal to you. You probably signed that deal without thinking twice. Didn't even read my name. You're right. My whole life was just another line item on a spreadsheet, a unit to be cleared, an obstacle to higher rents. Walter's voice rose slightly. I was somebody before your company came, had a home, had dignity, had a place where I belonged. His eyes were wet now. Now I'm just another old man with a cane eating charity soup in a church basement. The room had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. Harrison put his head in his hands. When he looked up, his voice was raw. Mr. Freeman, I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back your home, or your 42 years, or your mornings watching the sunrise. No, you can't. But I can stop doing it. I can change how we build. I can make sure no one else loses their home the way you did. Walter's eyes narrowed. Words are cheap, Mr. Webb. I know, so let me prove it. Harrison's voice steadied. Come work with me. Help me understand what I've been too blind to see. Tell me how to build without destroying, because I don't know how, and I need someone who does. Walter stared. The room was silent. You serious? Jerome asked from across the room. Yes. You want a homeless old man to tell you how to run your billion-dollar company? He's not homeless because of bad luck, Harrison said clearly. He's homeless because of me, and he knows more about what this community needs than I ever will. Walter picked up his soup, took a slow sip, set it down. I'll think about it, he said quietly. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. Harrison nodded, stood, walked back to the kitchen. His hands were shaking. His heart was pounding. But for the first time in his life, he'd told the complete truth, and it didn't destroy him. It might actually save him. Harrison didn't sleep. He read files until his eyes burned. 3,000 families, over 15 years. Each name, each story, each life reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet. At 8:01 a.m., he walked into the boardroom on the 68th floor. 9 faces stared back. People who'd helped him build his empire. Janet Torres, his CFO. Michael Chen, his business partner since college. Board members who'd trusted his vision for 2 decades. I'm restructuring how we develop, Harrison said. No preamble, no small talk. Janet leaned forward. Harrison, we discussed this. You can't just... I've spent the last week reading displacement records, not summaries. Every single file. 3,000 families over 15 years. His voice was steady but raw. James Patterson, Keisha Williams, Rose Chen, who died 4 months after we evicted her. Walter Freeman, who lost his home of 42 years and now sleeps in a shelter. He looked around the table. We call ourselves developers. We're not. We're displacement machines. We're poverty manufacturers. We erase communities and call it progress. We destroy homes and call it growth. Michael stood. Harrison, this is business. It's how the industry works. Then the industry is broken. Harrison's voice rose. I met a man this week who lost everything because I signed a deal without reading his name. I have a woman who's worked for my family for 35 years, who raised me after my mother died, and she's been in the hospital with diabetes because the insurance I gave her is garbage. He slammed a folder on the table. Her son died homeless after we evicted him, and I never even knew she had a son. The room went silent. I'm proposing we build differently, Harrison continued. Mixed income housing with pathways to ownership. Community advisory boards with real power, including veto authority over projects. Hiring pipelines for displaced residents. Profit sharing with long-term community members. We'll still be profitable, just not at their expense. Janet opened the folder, scanned the numbers. This cuts our margins by 45%. I don't care. The investors will revolt. Then we find new investors. Michael's face hardened. Harrison, what the hell has happened to you? Harrison looked at his oldest friend. I woke up, Mike. I woke up to what we've been doing, who we've been hurting, and I can't do it anymore. Not for my margins, not for my reputation, not for my soul. An older board member, Eleanor Hoffman, who'd worked with Harrison's grandfather, spoke quietly. Your grandfather built this company on relationships, on knowing the people he built for. Somewhere along the way, we forgot that. She looked around the table. Maybe it's time we remembered. Another board member nodded. Then another. But two shook their heads and stood. This is financial suicide, one said. I'm out. They left. 7 remained. Janet sighed heavily. You're really going to do this? With or without you. But I'm asking you to trust me one more time. Long silence. Michael sat back down. Then let's figure out how to make it work. The meeting lasted 6 hours. Plans were drawn, budgets recalculated, timelines extended. When it ended, Harrison drove straight to Brooklyn Hospital. Dorothy was sitting up, looking stronger. Color had returned to her face. I did it, he said. I restructured everything. Dorothy searched his face. And I need your help. I want you to be director of community partnerships, full salary, equal to any executive, full decision-making authority, a seat on the board. Her eyes widened. Why me? Because you've been doing this work for 18 years while I built towers. Because you see people I've spent my life ignoring. Because you're the only person who loved me enough to believe I could change. His voice broke. You showed me what grace looks like. Now I'm asking you to help me live it. Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. She reached for his hand. Okay, she whispered. Let's get to work. 4 months later, Harrison stood before the city council. Same room where he'd presented the Williamsburg waterfront project. Same council members who'd approved his plans without question for 20 years. But everything was different now. I'm here to present Fulton Commons, Harrison said. A community-centered development built with residents, not on top of them. He clicked to the first slide. Not profit projections, faces, names, stories. This is Walter Freeman, 76, who lost his home of 42 years to my company's gentrification. He's now co-chair of our community advisory board, helping redesign this project from the ground up. Walter sat in the front row, wearing a suit, dignified. This is Carmen Rodriguez, single mother of 3, displaced 18 months ago. She's now our family services director, ensuring no family loses their home without real support and alternatives. Carmen sat beside Walter, chin high. This is Jerome Taylor, Army veteran, who my company helped make homeless in 2016. He's now director of Veterans Housing, creating pathways for former service members. Jerome nodded from the audience. Harrison continued. Fulton Commons will be 50% affordable housing, 30% workforce housing, 20% market rate. Every displaced family has been offered right of first return, not as tenants, but as co-owners with equity stakes. Council members leaned forward. We're hiring locally. 100% of construction jobs reserved for community residents. Training programs, microloans for small businesses, a community center designed by the people who'll use it. He paused. This project will take longer, cost more upfront, and yes, our profit margins will be smaller, but we'll be building something that lasts, something that serves, something that restores rather than extracts. One council member raised her hand. Mr. Webb, this is a dramatic departure from your previous model. What changed? Harrison looked at Dorothy, sitting quietly in the back row, healthy now, smiling. I did. The vote was unanimous. Approved. Outside, Walter was waiting. You did good in there, son. We did good, Harrison corrected. Walter smiled. First time Harrison had seen it. Yeah, we did. 20 months later, Fulton Commons opened. Not with politicians and champagne. With a neighborhood cookout. Tables stretched down the block. Music from someone's sound system. Kids playing between the buildings. 3 stories. Big windows. Porches where people could sit and watch the sunrise. Harrison stood at the edge, watching. Jerome walked by with a woman, hand in hand. Mr. Webb, this is my fiancée, Keisha. Congratulations. Harrison smiled. Jerome told me what you did, Keisha said, giving him a chance when no one else would. He gave me a chance, Harrison said. Taught me how to see. Walter sat on a bench in front of his new apartment. Same view he'd had 42 years ago. Same morning sunrise. He waved. Harrison waved back. Carmen's 3 kids played basketball on the new court. She stood watching, arms folded, peace on her face. When she saw Harrison, she mouthed, "Thank you." He nodded, throat tight. Dorothy walked up beside him, silver hair catching the afternoon light. Healthier now, stronger. You did it, she said softly. We did it, she smiled. Yes, we did. Amara ran up. Miss Dorothy, come see our apartment. We have 2 bedrooms and a real kitchen. Dorothy laughed. I'll be right there. Baby? Amara ran off. Dorothy started to follow, then stopped and turned back. Harrison? Yeah? Welcome to the family, for real this time. She walked away, and Harrison stood there, those words washing over him like grace. He'd spent his whole life in penthouses and boardrooms, surrounded by wealth and achievement. But he'd never belonged anywhere. Not until now. Not until he learned that home isn't about what you own. It's about where you're known. Harrison walked into the crowd, shook hands, hugged kids, listened to stories. Somewhere in the middle of it all, surrounded by people he once ignored, in a neighborhood he almost destroyed, Harrison Webb finally understood what his life was for. Not to build higher, to lift others up, not to be seen, to see. This is redemption. This is grace. This is home. This is enough. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Maybe it's someone chasing success but missing what matters. Maybe it's someone who feels invisible, unseen. Or maybe it's you, realizing it's never too late to change, to see, to come home. Drop a comment and tell me, what's one person in your life you've taken for granted? What's one way you can see them differently today? Remember, legacy isn't what you build. It's who you lift. It's not your name on a building. It's your heart in the people who'll remember you long after you're gone. God brought you to this story for a reason. Don't walk away unchanged. See you in the next one.